Karen flashed her brightest fake smile as she approached the barista. "Excuse me, I ordered a venti iced caramel macchiato with extra caramel drizzle and whipped cream 10 minutes ago. Where is it?" The young barista glanced nervously at the long line behind Karen. I'm so sorry, ma'am. We're a bit backed up at the moment. Your drink will be ready shortly." Karen's saccharine expression immediately soured. "That is unacceptable. I'm already late for my hair appointment. Do you have any idea how much I pay to keep this color?" She gestured dramatically at her highlighted blonde locks. Customers shifted uncomfortably as Karen continued her tirade, her shrill voice carrying across the packed coffee shop. The barista tried in vain to calm her down, but Karen only grew more agitated. "This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to your manager right now. I'm a paying customer, and I shouldn't have to wait this long for my order." Just then, the door to the back room swung open, and a middle-aged woman in a green apron strode out. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" Karen whirled around, her eyes blazing. "Yes, there is a problem. Your incompetent staff can't even get a simple coffee order right. I've been waiting forever, and I'm about to miss my appointment." The manager held up a placating hand. "I apologize for the delay, ma'am. We're experiencing an unexpectedly high volume of customers this morning. Let me get your drink for you right away." She turned to the barista. "Please expedite this customer's order immediately." The barista nodded and hurried off, leaving Karen tapping her foot impatiently. When the drink was finally ready, she snatched it from the counter with a huff. "It's about time. And you can tell your staff to work on their customer service skills." Karen took a sip, wincing at the scalding temperature. "This is too hot. Unbelievable." The manager's brow furrowed. "Ma'am, I really must insist that you lower your voice. You're disturbing the other customers." Karen sneered. "I'll lower my voice when you do your job properly. Now, I demand a refund for this subpar service." "I'm afraid I can't do that, ma'am. You've already received your drink." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Are you serious? This is outrageous. I'm calling the police." Before the manager could respond, Karen whipped out her phone and began frantically dialing. The other customers exchanged bewildered glances, some even pulling out their own phones to record the spectacle unfolding before them. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, and 2 uniformed officers strode through the entrance. All eyes turned to Karen as she triumphantly waved them over. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. These people are refusing to give me a refund for my terrible service." The officers glanced around, seemingly bewildered by the situation. One of them approached Karen cautiously. "Ma'am, what seems to be the problem here?" Karen launched into a dramatic retelling of her harrowing experience, embellishing details and gesticulating wildly. The officers listened patiently, occasionally exchanging confused looks. When Karen finished, the officers conferred briefly before turning back to her. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the situation, and it appears you're the one causing a disturbance. We're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Karen's jaw dropped. "What? You can't be serious. I'm the victim here." The officers exchanged a glance. "Ma'am, if you don't comply, we'll have to place you under arrest." Karen's eyes widened in shock as the officers' words sank in. "Arrest me? You can't be serious. I'm the one who called you here." The officers remained steadfast. "Ma'am, you've been causing a significant disturbance and refusing to comply with the manager's requests. We have no choice but to escort you from the premises." Karen's face flushed with indignation. "This is an outrage. I pay taxes, you know. I demand to be treated with respect." One of the officers stepped forward, his expression grim. "Ma'am, if you don't leave willingly, we'll have to place you under arrest for disorderly conduct." Karen glanced around the coffee shop, eyes wild. The other patrons watched the scene unfold with a mix of fascination and discomfort. She could feel their judging stares burning into her. Panic began to set in as the gravity of the situation sank in. Karen was not used to being on the receiving end of authority. She was the one who always got her way, the one who wielded power over others. You can't do this to me. I know my rights. This is discrimination. Karen's voice rose to a shrill shriek, drawing even more attention to the spectacle. The officers exchanged a resigned look. Ma'am, you're under arrest. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. Karen's jaw dropped as one of the officers produced a pair of handcuffs. No, no, no. This can't be happening. You're making a huge mistake. As the officer moved to secure the cuffs around her wrists, Karen's survival instinct kicked in. She lashed out, swinging her arms wildly and knocking the officer's hand away. Don't touch me. I'll have your badge for this. The other officer quickly stepped in, grabbing Karen's arms and attempting to restrain her. Karen thrashed and screamed, drawing the horrified stares of the onlookers. In the chaos, Karen's phone slipped from her grip and clattered to the floor, the screen shattering on impact. She watched in dismay as the officers overpowered her, cuffing her hands behind her back. You're under arrest for assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Karen's mind raced as the officers began to lead her out of the coffee shop. This couldn't be happening. She was the victim here, not the criminal. How dare they treat her this way? As the officers escorted her to the patrol car, Karen's gaze fell upon the shattered remains of her phone. She felt a pang of panic, realizing she was now cut off from her usual channels of power and influence. With a sinking feeling, Karen knew that her world was about to be turned upside down. The consequences of her actions were finally catching up to her, and she had no one to blame but herself. The ride to the police station was a blur for Karen. She sat in the back seat of the patrol car, her hands cuffed behind her back, her mind racing with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and growing dread. How could this be happening to her? She was the one who had called the police, expecting them to side with her and force the coffee shop to comply with her demands. But instead, she found herself on the wrong side of the law, arrested and humiliated. As the car pulled into the station, Karen's heart sank. She knew she was in serious trouble, and the thought of spending even a single night in jail filled her with a sense of sheer panic. "Get out of the car, ma'am," one of the officers commanded, opening the door and motioning for her to step out. Karen hesitated, her pride warring with her fear. "You can't do this to me. I'm a respectable member of this community." The officer's expression remained impassive. "Ma'am, I suggest you cooperate, or things will only get worse for you." Reluctantly, Karen shuffled out of the car, her cuffed hands making the process awkward and uncomfortable. As she entered the station, the unfamiliar surroundings only added to her growing sense of unease. The officers led her to a small room, where they instructed her to sit down. Karen complied, her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to get herself out of this predicament. "Now, ma'am, we're going to need you to answer a few questions," one of the officers said, pulling out a notepad and pen. Karen's chin jutted out defiantly. "I want to speak to a lawyer. I know my rights, and I won't say anything until I have legal representation." The officer nodded. "That's your prerogative, ma'am. However, it would be in your best interest to cooperate with us." Karen's lips thinned into a tight line. "I don't care what's in my best interest. I'm not saying another word until my lawyer gets here." The officer shrugged and left the room, leaving Karen alone with her thoughts. As the gravity of her situation sank in, she felt a growing sense of panic. She had never been in trouble with the law before, and the prospect of facing criminal charges was terrifying. Karen's mind raced, trying to come up with a way to get herself out of this mess. She couldn't imagine her life being appended by something as trivial as a coffee order. Surely, there had to be a way to make this all go away. But as the minutes ticked by and no one came to her rescue, Karen's confidence began to waver. She had always been able to rely on her wealth, her connections, and her ability to manipulate the system to get what she wanted. But now, those tools seemed to be failing her. As the realization dawned on her, Karen felt a familiar sensation. The sensation of being powerless, of being at the mercy of forces beyond her control. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if she had what it took to come out on top. Time seemed to crawl by as Karen sat alone in the small room, her wrists chafing against the cold metal of the handcuffs. The gravity of her situation weighed heavily on her, and she couldn't shake the sense of panic that had settled into the pit of her stomach. Just then, the door swung open, and a stern-faced woman in a crisp suit entered the room. "Miss Peterson, I'm your attorney, Elizabeth Daniels. I've been informed of the charges against you." Karen's face lit up with relief. Finally, someone who can fix this mess. This is all a misunderstanding, and I need you to get me out of here immediately. Elizabeth held up a hand, silencing Karen's tirade. "I understand you're upset, but I need you to listen carefully. The charges against you are serious. Assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. Those are not minor offenses." Karen's brow furrowed in confusion. "But I'm the victim here. Those incompetent baristas and the rude manager are the ones who should be arrested, not me." Elizabeth shook her head. "I'm afraid the evidence doesn't support your version of events. The officer's report indicates that you were the one causing a disturbance and refusing to comply with their instructions." Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. "That can't be true. I have an impeccable reputation in this community. Nobody is going to believe their word over mine." "Unfortunately, Miss Peterson, that may not be enough. The officer's testimony, along with the evidence from the other witnesses and the damage to your phone, paints a clear picture of what happened. You're facing potential jail time if you're convicted." Karen felt the blood drain from her face. Jail time? No, this can't be happening. You have to do something, Elizabeth. I can't go to jail. I just can't. Elizabeth's expression softened slightly. "I'll do my best to negotiate a plea deal or get the charges reduced, but you need to understand the gravity of the situation. Your actions had real consequences, and you'll need to take responsibility for them." Karen shook her head vehemently. "No, I won't take responsibility for anything. This is all their fault, not mine. You need to make them pay for this." Elizabeth sighed. "Miss Peterson, I understand you're feeling overwhelmed, but that kind of attitude isn't going to help your case. You need to be cooperative and show the court that you're willing to take accountability for your actions." Karen's eyes narrowed as a spark of defiance flared within her. "I don't care what you say, Elizabeth. I'm not going to let them ruin my life. There has to be a way to make this all go away." Elizabeth leveled a stern gaze at her client. "I'd advise you to reconsider that stance, Miss Peterson. The more you resist and refuse to cooperate, the worse the consequences will be. It's time to start facing the reality of your situation." Karen's resolve wavered momentarily, but then a glimmer of determination flickered in her eyes. She may have been caught off guard this time, but she wasn't about to let this defeat her. She would find a way to beat the system, no matter what it took. As the days passed, Karen's legal battle continued to unfold, and her sense of unease only grew stronger. She had never felt so powerless, so out of control of her own life. Despite her lawyer's best efforts, the prosecution seemed determined to make an example out of her. The district attorney was pushing for a harsh sentence, citing the severity of the charges and Karen's refusal to cooperate. "This is outrageous." Karen fumed during one of her meetings with Elizabeth. "I'm the victim here, and yet they're treating me like a common criminal." Elizabeth sighed, her patience wearing thin. "I understand your frustration, Miss Peterson, but you need to start taking this seriously. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and the prosecutor is not going to back down easily." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Then you need to find a way to make them back down." "I have connections, influence. Surely there's someone we can call in to make this all go away. Elizabeth shook her head. I'm afraid that's not how the justice system works. Trying to leverage your connections would only make the situation worse. The best thing you can do is cooperate and show the court that you're willing to take responsibility for your actions. Karen scoffed. Responsibility? I didn't do anything wrong. Those baristas and that manager are the ones who should be held accountable. I'm the victim here, and I won't be made to feel like a criminal. Miss Peterson, you need to understand that your actions had real consequences. The fact that you refuse to acknowledge that is only making things worse for you. If you want to have any chance of a favorable outcome, you need to start taking a more constructive approach. Karen's jaw clenched as she stared defiantly at her lawyer. I don't care what you say, Elizabeth. I'm not going to back down, and I'm not going to take the fall for this. There has to be a way to turn this all around. Elizabeth shook her head, her expression grave. I've done everything I can to help you, Miss Peterson, but you're making it increasingly difficult. If you continue down this path, the consequences could be severe. Karen's gaze hardened, a glimmer of determination sparking in her eyes. I'm not going to let them win. I'll find a way to beat this, even if I have to do it on my own. As the meeting came to a close, Karen felt a surge of resolve. She wasn't going to let the system crush her. She was Karen Peterson, a pillar of the community, and she wasn't going to go down without a fight. With a newfound determination, Karen began to plot her next move, determined to regain the control she felt slipping through her fingers. This was her life, and she was going to do whatever it took to come out on top. As the court date approached, Karen's anxiety only continued to grow. Despite her lawyer's best efforts, the prosecution seemed unwilling to budge on the charges, and the prospect of a jail sentence loomed ever closer. Desperate to avoid the consequences of her actions, Karen began to explore alternative avenues to sway the outcome in her favor. She had always been adept at manipulating the system to her advantage, and she wasn't about to let a few pesky charges stand in her way. Karen started by reaching out to her extensive network of contacts, calling in every favor she could. She used her wealth and influence to put pressure on the district attorney's office, hoping to find a way to have the charges reduced or even dropped entirely. But as she made call after call, she quickly realized that her usual tactics were no longer as effective as they once had been. The prosecutors remained steadfast, unmoved by her pleas and demands. Undeterred, Karen shifted her focus to the judge presiding over her case. She had heard whispers that the judge was a stickler for the letter of the law, but Karen was determined to find a way to sway his opinion. Utilizing her considerable resources, Karen began to dig deeper into the judge's background, searching for any potential vulnerabilities or leverage she could use. She was willing to go to any lengths to ensure a favorable outcome, no matter the cost. As the court date drew nearer, Karen's desperation only intensified. She spent countless hours poring over legal documents, searching for any loophole or technicality that could give her the edge she needed. But with each passing day, the weight of her situation began to bear down on her. The thought of facing a jail sentence filled her with a sense of dread that she had never experienced before. She was used to getting her way, and the prospect of losing that control was utterly terrifying. In a last-ditch effort, Karen even considered the possibility of fleeing the country, of starting a new life where no one knew her name. But the idea of abandoning her comfortable life and her well-established reputation was simply too much to bear. As the final hours ticked by, Karen found herself grasping at straws, her mind racing with a million different scenarios, each more desperate than the last. She had never felt so powerless, so utterly at the mercy of a system she had always been able to manipulate. And as she sat in the courtroom, waiting for the judge to deliver his verdict, Karen knew that she was facing the biggest test of her life. The stakes had never been higher, and she was determined to do whatever it took to emerge victorious. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the judge took his seat and cleared his throat. Karen felt her heart pounding in her chest, her palms sweaty with anticipation. "Will the defendant please rise?" Karen slowly rose to her feet, her lawyer by her side. She could feel the weight of the judge's gaze upon her, and she straightened her shoulders, determined to project an air of confidence and composure. Ms. Karen Peterson, you have been charged with assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, it is the judgment of this court that you are guilty on both counts. Karen's eyes widened in shock, and she felt her stomach drop. This couldn't be happening. She had been so sure that she could manipulate the system, that she could somehow escape the consequences of her actions. The court has taken into account your history of charitable contributions and community involvement, as well as the testimony of your lawyer regarding your otherwise exemplary record. However, the gravity of your actions on the day in question cannot be overlooked. The judge paused, fixing Karen with a stern gaze. Ms. Peterson, your entitled and disruptive behavior that day not only caused a significant disturbance, but also put the safety of the officers and the other patrons at risk. Your refusal to cooperate with the authorities and your attempts to use your influence to avoid accountability have only served to exacerbate the situation. Karen felt her heart racing, her mind frantically searching for a way to interject, to plead her case, but the judge continued uninterrupted. Therefore, it is the sentence of this court that you be incarcerated for a period of 6 months. During this time, you will be required to attend anger management and conflict resolution classes, as well as perform 200 hours of community service. The courtroom erupted in a collective gasp, and Karen felt as if the walls were closing in around her. 6 months in jail, community service, this couldn't be happening. She was Karen Peterson, a pillar of the community, and she was being treated like a common criminal. As the bailiffs moved to escort her out of the courtroom, Karen's composure finally crumbled. She turned to her lawyer, her eyes wild with panic. Elizabeth, you have to do something. This can't be happening. I won't go to jail. I won't. But Elizabeth's expression was one of resignation. I'm sorry, Miss Peterson, but the judge has made his decision. There's nothing more I can do. Karen's world began to spin as the reality of her situation sank in. She had always been the one in control, the one who called the shots, and now she was being forced to face the consequences of her actions. As the bailiffs led her away, Karen felt a sense of overwhelming dread and disbelief. This was not how her story was supposed to end. She was supposed to be the victor, not the vanquished. But in that moment, as she was led away in handcuffs, Karen knew that her world had been irrevocably changed. The sense of entitlement and privilege that had once been her shield had now become her downfall, and she had no one to blame but herself. The 6 months of Karen's incarceration were a true test of her resilience and adaptability. Gone were the days of privilege and entitlement, replaced by the harsh realities of life behind bars. In the beginning, Karen struggled to come to terms with her new circumstances. She fought against the system, refusing to participate in the court-ordered classes and community service. Her defiant attitude only earned her scorn from the other inmates and further disciplinary action from the guards. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Karen slowly began to recognize the futility of her resistance. She realized that her usual tactics of manipulation and intimidation held no sway in this environment, and she was forced to confront the reality of her actions. It was a humbling experience, one that forced Karen to reflect on the ways in which her entitled behavior had alienated those around her. She saw the resentment and disdain in the eyes of the other inmates, and it forced her to confront the fact that she had been the architect of her own downfall. Slowly, Karen began to participate in the anger management and conflict resolution classes, finding unexpected solace in the lessons they imparted. For the first time in her life, she was forced to grapple with her own flaws and shortcomings, to acknowledge the ways in which her actions had hurt others. It was a painful process, but one that ultimately served to transform Karen in unexpected ways. As she completed her community service, working alongside individuals from all walks of life, she began to develop a newfound sense of empathy and understanding. By the time her sentence was up, Karen emerged a changed woman. She had learned humility, compassion, and the true value of accountability. Gone was the entitled Karen of the past, replaced by a more thoughtful, introspective individual who was determined to make amends for her past transgressions. As she stepped out into the world, Karen knew that her journey was far from over. She had a long road ahead of her, both in terms of rebuilding her reputation and mending the relationships she had damaged. But for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of purpose and determination that had been absent before. Karen's story had taken an unexpected turn, but in the end, it had transformed her in ways she could never have imagined. The consequences of her actions had been severe, but they had also forced her to confront the darker aspects of her own character. And as she looked towards the future, Karen knew that she was ready to embrace a new chapter in her life, one that would be defined not by her privilege, but by her growth and her unwavering commitment to becoming a better person.